I stood at the back of the church clutching a bouquet of white lilies that felt heavier than they should have. My parents Edward and Margaret Hart sat in the front row, faces perfectly composed, framed by black designer clothes and diamond jewelry that caught the light like tiny shards of ice. My father's arm rested protectively behind my mother's chair, while I remained in the shadows, an uninvited ghost at my own grandfather's funeral. When the service ended, people came forward to comfort them, not me. They whispered, "Your father was such a great man," and Margaret would dab at her dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Not once did her gaze shift toward me. To them, I was invisible. The family maid. The charity case they had saved. I was about to leave quietly when a man in a dark gray suit stepped up beside me. "Miss Hart," he asked, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "Your grandfather left you something. He wanted you to know you were never meant to live like this." My stomach tightened. I stared at him, trying to place his face. He introduced himself as Mr. Collins, the family lawyer. Before I could ask anything, he slipped a small white envelope into my hand and whispered, "Read it when you're alone," then disappeared into the crowd. I stood frozen in the aisle, the scent of lilies and incense swirling around me, unsure if I should feel fear or hope. The Harts were a Florida dynasty, old money-polished manors and a mansion that could fit an entire hotel inside. Growing up in that house should have meant privilege. Instead, it meant servitude. When people asked about my childhood, I used to smile and say I was lucky to have a home. That was what my mother drilled into me. Gratitude was the currency she demanded. My first memory in that house was of polished marble floors, and Margaret's voice cutting through the air like glass. "Lena, pick that up before someone trips." I was 5, clutching a rag doll I'd been given at the orphanage before they rescued me. By the time I turned 7, I knew how to scrub floors until my knees bled. When guests came over, I wasn't introduced as their daughter, but as Lena. She helps around the house. The help, the orphan, the girl who should have been grateful for leftovers and secondhand clothes. My father Edward barely spoke to me. When he did, it was usually to correct me. "Speak clearly, Lena. Don't mumble." No one likes a timid girl. Yet no one wanted me to speak too clearly either. At family dinners, my job was to serve the food, then fade into the background. Ryan and Emily, their real children, had birthday parties with magicians, live music, and walls covered in balloons. I got a store-bought cupcake if anyone remembered at all. It wasn't just the chores, it was the constant reminders that I didn't belong. Margaret loved to remind me that not everyone would have taken you in, you know. Whenever I dared to ask about my past, where I came from, who my real parents were, her lips would tighten. "The past doesn't matter. What matters is that we gave you a roof over your head. That's love, Lena." But love never felt like that. Love wasn't the way she'd sigh whenever I entered the room, or the way Edward's expression turned to stone if I spoke out of turn. Love wasn't a basement room with a single bed and a flickering light bulb. The only person who ever made me feel seen was my grandfather, Arthur Hart. Grandpa Arthur had a way of walking into a room that changed its air. He'd wink at me across the dinner table when Margaret complained about my lack of refinement. He'd slip me books under the table, classics, biographies, stories of people who built themselves from nothing. Once he whispered, "You've got fire in you, kid. Don't let them snuff it out." Those moments were rare, stolen fragments in a life built on silence. When Grandpa visited, Margaret's perfect smile would falter. Edward would become even quieter, eyes narrowing whenever Arthur asked me about school or my plans. They didn't like him paying attention to me, and he knew it. When I turned 16, I overheard a fight late one night. Their voices carried through the vents. "She's not one of us, Edward," my mother hissed. "She's under our roof, Margaret." "That's enough. Arthur favors her, and it's dangerous. She could get ideas. You know what's at stake." The words haunted me for years. She could get ideas. Ideas about what at the time I didn't dare ask. I did what I always did, kept my head down, did my chores, and tried to stay invisible. The habit stuck. Even as an adult, I'd catch myself apologizing for existing. I told myself they loved me in their own way. That this was how family worked. Standing at Arthur's funeral, those lies finally crumbled. I hadn't seen him in months before he died. Margaret said he needed rest, but now I realized she'd been keeping me away. I wanted to believe he'd left me a note. Maybe a keepsake. Something small. A final piece of kindness in a life starved of it. But the way Mr. Collins had looked at me, there was something heavier behind his eyes. Something dangerous. The crowd began to thin. Ryan was surrounded by people from the family company Heart Energy Holdings, shaking hands like a prince accepting tribute. Emily posed for pictures in her black dress, smiling as if she were at a gala, not a funeral. Margaret's voice carried through the air, sharp and false. Arthur was the pillar of our family. We will honor his legacy. I wanted to scream. You ignored him while he was alive. But I just stood there, my expression polite, my heart burning. When no one was looking, I slipped out the side door, the envelope still in my hand. Rain had started to fall, a soft drizzle that smelled of salt and asphalt. I sat in my car, the world blurring behind the fogged glass. For a long time I couldn't bring myself to open it. My fingers trembled as I tore the flap. Inside was a folded letter handwritten in my grandfather's shaky pen. Lena, if you're reading this, then they've done what I feared. You were never meant to be the servant in their house. You are the rightful heir to what I built. There are truths buried in this family that will try to bury you too. Don't let them. Trust Mr. Collins. He knows where to begin. My vision swam. Rightful heir. A second sheet slipped out, an address, scrawled in ink, the logo of a law firm embossed at the top. Beneath it, a line that made my breath catch: Heart Energy Holdings, Private Amendment, Beneficiary Lena G. Hart. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Heart Energy was worth billions. Arthur's company, the empire Edward now controlled. And my name was printed on that paper as if I belonged there all along. Lightning split the sky outside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just angry, I was awake. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it inside my coat, and started the car. The rain beat harder against the windshield, a steady rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. Tomorrow I'd visit Mr. Collins. Tomorrow I'd find out what my grandfather had meant. For now, I drove through the storm with one thought echoing in my head: they raised me to serve. But maybe they forgot servants know every secret in the house. The first memory I have of the Hart mansion isn't the marble floors or the chandeliers, it's the smell of bleach. I was 7, kneeling on the kitchen tiles, scrubbing until my reflection blurred back at me. The sound of laughter drifted in through the open window, high and bright. Ryan and Emily were splashing in the pool while Margaret's voice rang out sweet and sharp. "Good girl," she said when she passed through the kitchen, tossing a fresh towel into my lap. "Make sure the silverware shines before dinner." I nodded like a good girl should. Back then, I thought love sounded like orders. The house was a museum of money, white pillars, velvet curtains, and art no one ever looked at. There were 5 bedrooms, but I slept in the laundry room on a narrow cot beside the dryer that never stopped humming. Every morning at 6, I woke to Margaret's voice, calling down the hall. "Lena, come on, chop chop." I folded clothes, set tables, polished wood until my fingers ached. Edward would glance at me over his newspaper, sometimes the same way he'd look at a passing waiter. "Speak clearly, Lena," he'd say if I stammered. "You live under this roof. Try to sound like it." But I didn't live under their roof. I worked under it. Ryan and Emily had the kind of childhood I used to see on TV. Private tutors, horseback lessons, piles of Christmas gifts that covered the living room floor. My name was never on the tags. If I was lucky, I got something secondhand, a sweater too big, a bracelet Emily didn't like. Margaret would tell me, "Don't pout, honey. You know it's not about things. You're part of this family in a different way." A different way. I learned early what that meant. I wasn't a daughter. I was the living proof of their charity. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 9. Guests filled the dining room, crystal glasses glinting under the chandelier. I was dressed in a plain gray dress, carrying a tray of dinner rolls. Margaret laughed at something one of her friends said and gestured toward me. She's our little helper. Can't imagine the house without her. Everyone smiled warmly, and I smiled back because that's what she taught me to do. Smile, nod, disappear. Only Grandpa Arthur saw me that night. He winked as I refilled his glass. Later, when everyone had gone, he pressed a book into my hands, Great Expectations. You're not meant to serve tables forever, kiddo, he whispered. You've got a spark in you. Don't let them snuff it out. For years, that was the only kindness I had. Margaret hated when Arthur visited. He spoils her, she told Edward once when she thought I wasn't listening. The girl doesn't need dreams, she needs discipline. I remember Edward's reply, calm and final. He's an old man. Let him have his illusions. At 14, I'd memorized every sound in that house. The creak of the staircase, the drip in the laundry, sync the footsteps that meant I should vanish before they saw me. Sometimes I'd sneak into the library when no one was home and read Arthur's books pretending I belonged to another world. But sooner or later, reality always knocked. Margaret shouting, Lena, the windows aren't going to clean themselves. I was 15 when the truth of my place hit me hard. That summer I made the honor roll. I'd stayed up late for weeks studying after chores. I left the report card on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would notice. The next morning, Margaret picked it up between two fingers, glanced at it, and said, Grades don't wash dishes, sweetheart. Breakfast isn't going to make itself. Later that day, Ryan shattered a window, playing baseball inside the house. When Edward came home and saw the glass everywhere, his voice thundered. Who did this? Ryan shrugged. Lena was cleaning near it, he said easily. I tried to explain, but Edward's face turned red. Don't talk back. You should have been paying attention. I cleaned the mess while they went out for dinner. That night I sat in the laundry room, hugging my knees to my chest. The hum of the dryer filled the silence. I remember thinking, maybe love really is just work you do without getting paid. Grandpa Arthur came by less often after that. Margaret said he was busy. Once when I dared to ask why, she snapped, because you drain the life out of him, that's why. But Arthur still found ways to reach me. Sometimes a book would appear on my bed with a sticky note. Keep reading, keep dreaming. Sometimes an envelope with $20 tucked inside. When I turned 16, he gave me a small chess set. We'd play in the library when no one else was home. You're getting good, he said once as I captured his queen. The trick is to think 3 moves ahead. He paused, watching me rearrange the pieces. That goes for life too. I didn't understand then, but I do now. He knew what was coming. A few months before he got sick, something changed. Edward started locking his office door. Margaret's whispers turned sharper. One afternoon, while I was dusting the hallway, I heard them fighting inside. She's not one of us, Margaret hissed. She's Arthur's blood, whether we like it or not. Edward shot back. That's impossible. There's no proof. Not yet, he said. My breath caught. Arthur's blood. I froze, the feather duster trembling in my hand. Before I could hear more, Margaret stormed out and spotted me. Eavesdropping again, she snapped. Go scrub the bathrooms. I didn't ask what they meant. Fear kept me quiet, but the question lodged in my chest, pulsing there like a heartbeat. When Arthur's visit stopped entirely, I knew something was wrong. I wrote him letters I never mailed. I told him about school, about the books I read, about how sometimes I pretended we were real family. I never got a reply. Then one night a soft knock came at the laundry room door. It was James, the old driver who'd worked for Arthur before Edward took over. He looked around nervously and handed me a small envelope. From the old man, he whispered. Inside was a note. Keep your head high, Lena. There are things you don't yet know. When the time comes, Collins will find you. I didn't know who Collins was, but I kept that letter hidden under my pillow for years. The day Arthur was taken to the hospital, Margaret wouldn't let me go. He's weak, she said curtly. He doesn't need you upsetting him. I argued for the first time in my life. He's my grandfather. The slap came fast and sharp. Don't you ever call him that again. I never saw him alive after that. When the call came that he'd passed, Margaret told me over breakfast like she was mentioning the weather. "Your grandfather's gone. The funeral's Friday. Try not to embarrass us." That was it. No tears, no emotion. Just another chore to check off. So when I stood in that church yesterday clutching those lilies, watching them perform their grief for cameras and guests, something in me snapped quietly. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It just shifted. I realized I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. And now this letter from Mr. Collins, this strange, impossible letter that said I was the rightful heir to Arthur's empire, was like a crack in the walls they'd built around me. Maybe everything they'd told me was a lie. That night, back in my tiny apartment, I laid out the pieces of my life, like chess pawns on the kitchen table, the letter from Arthur, the books he'd given me, the chess, set the memory of that argument about proof. It all pointed to one thing. Arthur hadn't just seen me, he'd been trying to protect me. And Edward and Margaret, they'd been protecting something else, something that was never meant to be theirs. I poured myself a glass of water, staring out the window at the lights of Jacksonville. I thought about all the years I spent cleaning up after them, how every stain, every broken thing I'd fixed had kept their world shining while mine dulled. I set the glass down and whispered to the empty room you taught me to serve. Now it's my turn to learn how to fight. The next morning I would walk into Mr. Collins's office and finally learn what they had stolen from me. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't knock before entering. I arrived at the law office early the next morning, long before the Florida heat settled in. The sign outside read Collins and Avery Attorneys at Law, a modest building on the edge of downtown Jacksonville, the kind of place people passed every day without noticing. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gripping the letter my grandfather had left me. My palms were damp, my stomach tight. It was the first time I'd ever walked into a place as someone who might actually matter. Inside the office smelled faintly of paper and coffee. A young receptionist led me down a narrow hallway to a room lined with bookshelves. Mr. Collins rose from behind his desk when I entered. Up close, he looked older than at the funeral, gray hair, tired eyes, a face that had seen more secrets than it ever wanted to. "Miss Hart," he said warmly, shaking my hand. Or should I say Miss Lena Grace Hart? "I've been expecting you." The sound of my full name startled me. Hardly anyone used it. "You have," he nodded and gestured to a chair. "Your grandfather made sure of that." I sat, my heart racing. What did he mean when he wrote that I was the rightful heir? That can't be real. Mr. Collins took a deep breath. Arthur Hart was a man of foresight. He suspected that his estate would be mishandled after his passing, so several years ago he wrote a private amendment to his will. It names you as the primary beneficiary of his controlling shares in Hart Energy Holdings. I blinked. "Shares, you mean stock?" "More than stock," he said quietly. "Control of the company." His portion was valued at approximately $3 billion. The words hit me like a punch. "That's impossible. Edward runs the company. He's the one who shouldn't be." Collins finished, sliding a thin folder across the desk. "Your grandfather left explicit instructions that his shares were to pass to you upon his death. Unfortunately, the family intervened before those instructions could be executed. Margaret and Edward convinced the firm handling the estate to delay the amendment, claiming you were never legally adopted. They said you had no standing as an heir." I stared at the papers in front of me, the letters swimming before my eyes. "But I'm his granddaughter. He said so himself." Collins looked at me with something close to pity. "I know. Arthur believed it too. But your legal records are complicated." A sharp chill ran through me. Complicated? How? He hesitated, then leaned forward. "Miss Hart, before we discuss that, I must warn you. What you're about to uncover could put you at risk. Your family is powerful, and power doesn't surrender quietly." I almost laughed, though nothing about this was funny. They already stole my childhood. What else could they possibly take? He studied me for a moment, then opened the folder. Inside was a single page with Arthur's signature, and a handwritten note at the bottom to be delivered to my granddaughter Lena Grace Hart upon my death. Trust no one under my son's roof. It was real. His handwriting the same bold looping letters I remembered from birthday cards and book inscriptions. I need to show you something else, Collins said, opening a desk drawer. He pulled out a smaller envelope yellowed around the edges. Arthur gave this to me 5 years ago. He said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until you came to me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter dated nearly a decade earlier. Edward and Margaret have taken control of company operations under false pretenses. Lena's adoption records are missing. I have reason to believe they were altered. If she ever comes forward, these documents will prove her legitimacy. Attached was a copy of my birth certificate, or what looked like one, but there was a black strip covering the section labeled Parents. What's under this? I asked, tracing the line with my finger. That's what we need to find out, Collins said. Your grandfather was trying to unseal those records before he died. He believed the truth about your birth would explain why your parents treated you the way they did. I leaned back, heart pounding. So what happens now? He folded his hands. Now we get the original documents. I've already filed a request with the county court, but these things take time. And I have to warn you, once Edward finds out you've spoken to me, he'll act fast. I stared at him. You think he'd try to stop me? I think. He already has, Collins said grimly. Yesterday evening my office was broken into. Nothing of value was stolen except the Hart case file. For a moment the room tilted. Are you saying my family had your office robbed? He didn't answer directly. They have resources, Miss Hart. People who are loyal to them. You should be careful. I thought of the black SUV I'd noticed, parked near my apartment that morning, the way it had followed me halfway here before turning off. Maybe it wasn't my imagination after all. What should I do? I asked quietly. Lay low. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. I'll make backup copies of everything I still have. We'll meet again in a few days once I've secured the missing paperwork. He hesitated, then added, If anything happens, call me immediately. When I left his office, the sky was overcast, the air heavy with humidity. I sat in my car staring at the envelope on the passenger seat. $3 billion. My name on a will. Missing adoption papers. It all sounded like the setup to a bad movie. Still, part of me wasn't surprised. Deep down, I'd always known something didn't add up. By the time I got home, dusk had settled over Jacksonville. The apartment felt too quiet. I poured myself a glass of water and reread Arthur's note, tracing his words until they blurred. A knock startled me. I opened the door to find Ryan standing in the hallway, still dressed in his funeral suit. His tie was loosened, his eyes sharp. Can I come in? He asked. Why? He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Family visit. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in like he owned the place, glancing around at the small apartment, the second-hand furniture, the box of bills on the counter. So, this is where you've been hiding. Cozy. Say what you came to say, Ryan. He turned toward me. Dad's worried. He thinks some people might have approached you today. Someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart. I crossed my arms. You mean Mr. Collins? Something flickered in his expression, then vanished. So he did talk to you. He was Grandpa's lawyer, I said carefully. He said Grandpa left me something. Ryan laughed, sharp and cruel. Don't tell me you believe that. Collins has been trying to squeeze money out of this family for years. Whatever he told you, it's garbage. He showed me a copy of the will. That wiped the smile off his face. Then you should destroy it. Why? Because it's fake, he said quickly. Too quickly. Grandpa was confused before he died. He wasn't thinking clearly. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Is that what you told yourself while you forged my life on paper? Ryan's jaw tightened. Watch what you're accusing me of. I stepped closer, anger finally bubbling up. All my life you and Emily treated me like I didn't belong. You called me the maid. You let me serve your birthday cake while you laughed. Now I know why you were scared. scared that maybe I was part of this family after all. For a moment his mask slipped, his voice softened. You don't know what you're talking about, Lena. You're stirring things you don't understand. Then explain it to me. He looked toward the window instead. Dad told me to make sure you don't cause trouble. For your own good. The words made my blood run cold. Tell your father I said that I'm done cleaning up after him. Ryan's eyes hardened. Be careful. You don't know what he's capable of. Maybe I do. He lingered at the door for a moment, then left without another word. When his footsteps faded down the hall, I locked the door and sank to the floor. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Lena, Mr. Collins's voice came through tight and urgent. They know. Someone broke into the courthouse. The original will is gone. What I have digital copies, but the hard evidence, it's been destroyed. You need to stay somewhere safe tonight. The line crackled. Mr. Collins, I said. Are you still there? His voice was faint now. If anything happens to me, find the file labeled Private Trust in the Heart Energy Archives. Arthur said, that's where the truth is. Then, the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the only sound my heartbeat pounding in my ears. They'd stolen my childhood. They'd stolen the man who believed in me. But I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. I reached for my phone again, opened a new note, and typed Tomorrow Heart Energy Headquarters. Find the private trust files. Find out who I really am. By morning, the city felt different, quieter, as if it knew something had shifted. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. Collins's pale face at the funeral, the way he'd said, your grandfather wanted you to have something. Now he was missing, maybe worse. And I was the only person left holding a thread that could unravel everything the Hearts had built. Heart Energy's headquarters sat like a monument on the riverfront, a 40-story glass tower reflecting the pale Florida sky. I'd been there before as a child, trailing behind Margaret during company luncheons. Back then, the marble floors had felt cold beneath my shoes, the air too crisp, too polished. Today, it still felt the same, but I wasn't here to serve coffee anymore. I was here to find the truth. I wore a plain black dress and carried a folder under my arm, the one with Arthur's letter and the partial will Collins had given me. As I entered the lobby, the receptionist smiled automatically. Good morning, Ms. Lena Hart, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to see Mr. Edward Hart. The receptionist froze, the polite smile faltering just slightly. Do you have an appointment? He'll want to see me, I said. She made a call, whispering into the receiver. Her eyes flicked up at me, once uncertain, then she nodded. Mr. Hart will meet you in his office. 38th floor. The elevator ride felt endless. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls, a woman who looked far calmer than she felt. My palms were slick with sweat and my heart was beating fast enough that I could feel it in my throat. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway lined with framed photographs, Edward shaking hands with governors. Margaret at Charity Gayless, Ryan standing beside a company jet. At the very end was a door, engraved with gold letters, Edward Hart, Chief Executive Officer. I knocked once. His voice came sharp and cold from inside. Come in. Edward sat behind an enormous oak desk, his posture perfect, every strand of silver hair in place. He looked like a man carved from control. Margaret sat in the corner, a half-empty cup of tea on the table beside her. When she saw me, her mouth tightened. Well, she said softly, the prodigal maid returns. I ignored her. We need to talk. Edward leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. You've been very busy, Lena. Visiting lawyers, asking questions, stirring up trouble. I'm not stirring anything, I said. I'm asking what I should have been told a long time ago. Margaret's laughter was light but sharp. You think because that old man favored you? You suddenly deserve a place at this table. I pulled Arthur's letter from the folder and placed it on the desk. He thought so. Edward's jaw tightened as he glanced at it. You have no idea what you're dealing with. That amendment is meaningless. Arthur was confused before he died. Confused enough to name me heir. He stood abruptly, palms flat on the desk. You think you're entitled to what I built? You think you can just walk in here with a few old papers and what you built I cut in. You built it on his back. And mine. For a moment, no one spoke. The air between us was heavy electric. Margaret rose from her chair, her voice suddenly low and vicious. You were nothing when we found you, do you understand that? Nothing. A scared little girl no one wanted. We gave you food, a roof, and education. You should be thanking us, not trying to destroy us. You didn't give me a life, I said. You stole one. Her eyes went wide, and for the first time fear flickered beneath her anger. Edward recovered first. Get out, he said. I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. The truth, he laughed once harshly. The truth would bury you. He pressed a button on his phone. Security. Before I could speak, the door opened. 2 guards stepped in. I grabbed the folder from the desk and backed away. You can throw me out, I said, but you can't stop what's coming. Collins told me about the private trust files. You can't erase everything. The color drained from Edward's face. He took a step forward. What did you say? I said I know where to look. He lunged for the folder, but I was faster. I slipped past the guards and out the door. The elevator doors were closing when I heard him shout behind me. You have no idea what you're starting, Lena. Outside, the air hit me like a wave. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my phone. I texted Collins. They know. I think they're coming for you. No reply. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind spinning. Every street sign looked unfamiliar, even though I'd lived in this city my entire life. Finally, I pulled over in front of an old diner and sat in the parking lot staring at the rain collecting on the windshield. I thought about Grandpa Arthur, about how he'd always told me to think 3 moves ahead. He'd left me clues for a reason, and I wasn't about to waste them. If Edward and Margaret were desperate enough to destroy evidence, then whatever was in those private trust files had to be bigger than money. It had to be something worth ruining lives over. I went home as the rain turned into a storm. Lightning flashed across the windows. I locked every door, every window, then sat at the kitchen table with the folder spread open. Arthur's letter, the fake birth certificate, the incomplete adoption papers, and something I hadn't noticed before, a smaller envelope tucked between the pages. My name was written on it in Arthur's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page folded once. Lena, if you've come this far, you deserve to know the truth. You are my only blood granddaughter. They've lied to you your entire life to protect what isn't theirs. Find the original trust document. It will tell you who you really are. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My only blood granddaughter. For years I'd accepted that I was adopted. I'd told myself that I should be grateful, that I didn't deserve more. But if Arthur was telling the truth, that meant Edward and Margaret had hidden something far worse than neglect. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number: stop digging, or you'll end up like Collins. I stared at it for a long time, the letters glowing on the screen, cold and final. Then another message came through seconds later. This is your only warning. I looked toward the window. A dark SUV sat across the street, engine idling, headlights off. I turned off the lights, heart pounding, and moved to the back of the apartment. For a moment, I considered calling the police. But what would I tell them? That the family who raised me might have killed a lawyer and stolen a company. They'd laugh me out of the station. Instead, I packed a small bag, Arthur's letters, Collins's notes, and the few things I couldn't bear to lose, and slipped out the back door into the alley. The rain drenched me instantly, but it felt like freedom. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stop. Somewhere out there, my name, my real name, was written in a file they'd tried to erase. If they thought fear would silence me, they'd forgotten who taught me to stand tall. Grandpa Arthur had said, "Don't let them bury the truth with me." I tightened my grip on the bag and whispered to the dark, "Don't worry, Grandpa. I won't." Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the slick pavement ahead of me. And for the first time, I didn't feel small or invisible. I felt like a storm about to break. I didn't sleep that night. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old wall clock, felt like footsteps sneaking up behind me. I kept my bag by the door ready to run if I heard a car pull up outside. By dawn, I made up my mind. If Mr. Collins was gone, then the only lead left was the one he'd given me the private trust files inside Heart Energy. Whatever they'd tried to bury was hidden there. The building opened at 8. I knew the routine from years of cleaning that office as a teenager, back when Margaret would send me to help out the staff, as if polishing brass nameplates was training for gratitude. Back then, no one noticed me. That was my greatest advantage now. I changed into a plain navy suit and tied my hair back. I looked like any other assistant or accountant heading to work. When I walked into the lobby, no one looked twice. The security guard, a new hire, judging by his posture, waved me through with a polite nod. Inside the elevator, I pressed the button for the archives floor B2. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirror, calm, composed, but beneath it, adrenaline burned through my veins. The sublevel smelled faintly of dust and printer ink. Rows of filing cabinets stretched down the hall, endless and cold. I slipped past the glass office labeled Records Management and into the back storage room. Every file drawer was labeled in perfect alphabetical order. I scanned the tags until I found it Private Trusts 1990 seconds. My hand shook as I pulled open the drawer. Folders upon folders, each marked with a family name, a project, a transaction. Near the back, I found one labeled A. Heart divided by family holdings. The tab was torn like someone had ripped it out before. I opened it half expecting nothing but blank paper. But it was there, an original deed stamped confidential. At the bottom, written in Arthur's careful script, beneficiary L.G. Hart. I read the next line and froze. Biological heir of Samuel Hart, co-founder. Samuel Hart. I'd never heard that name before. I read it again, slower this time. Beneath the signature was a date, the 12th of April 1993, the year I turned 5. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I stuffed the folder into my bag and pressed myself against the wall. The door creaked open and 2 voices floated in. Told Edward we'd sweep the records by noon, one of them said. What about that file? Collins flagged, already deleted digitally. Hard copies next. The boss doesn't want any surprises. I held my breath as they passed. The door closed again. When the hall went quiet, I slipped out, moving fast. But as I turned the corner, someone blocked my way. Ryan. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened. You shouldn't be here, he said. You said that last time. He exhaled sharply. You don't get it. Dad's losing control. He's desperate. He'll burn everything to keep this quiet. I clutched my bag tighter. Then he'll have to burn me too. He grabbed my arm. I'm serious, Lena. He's already crossed the line. Collins' eye yanked free. What about Collins? Ryan looked away. You don't want to know. I stared at him. You're still protecting him. I'm trying to protect you, he said. You have no idea how deep this goes. Then tell me, I demanded. Tell me who Samuel Hart is. His jaw clenched. You need to leave the city. Go somewhere he can't reach you. Who was he? Ryan looked at me for a long time, something shifting behind his eyes. He was Dad's brother, he said finally. My uncle, your father. The words landed like a punch to the chest. That's not possible. He died before you came to live with us, Ryan said quietly. At least that's what they told me. I took a step back. They told you he died. He nodded. There was a fire at one of the research facilities. Dad said Samuel's experiments caused it. He said Grandpa covered it up to protect the family. My throat went dry. What kind of experiments? I don't know, Ryan said. But whatever Samuel was working on, it made the company what it is today. I opened my bag and showed him the file. He didn't die in that fire. Arthur's will names him as co-founder, and me as his heir. Ryan's eyes widened. You're saying your cousin I finished for him? Not your sister, not the orphan they took in. They stole me after my father died. He rubbed his temples, his expression breaking. Jesus, Lena. I started to move past him, but he grabbed my shoulder. Where are you going? To finish what Arthur started. Don't, he said, stepping in front of me. You're walking into something you can't walk out of. I met his eyes. I've been walking out of their shadows my whole life. I'm done being afraid. For a moment I thought he'd stop me, but then he stepped aside, defeated. If you're going to do this, you'll need help, he said. There's someone you should meet. Who? A systems analyst Dad fired last year, Ava Kim. She handled all of Grandpa's encrypted files before Edward shut down the department. If anyone can unlock what's left, it's her. He scribbled a number on a notepad and handed it to me. She won't talk unless she knows you're not with him. I slipped the note into my pocket. Why are you helping me? Ryan hesitated. Because maybe you're the only heart left who deserves to win. I left without looking back. That evening I met Ava in a rundown cafe by the docks. She was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe, with sharp eyes and a calm confidence that made me instantly trust her. I thought you might show up, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Ryan warned me you'd come. He didn't tell you why, she smirked. Let's just say your family isn't great at keeping secrets. I handed her the file. Can you access the private trust backups? She skimmed through the pages, her brow furrowing. This is big, she said. If this gets out, Edward Hart's finished. But it's not just about inheritance. What do you mean? There's a secondary archive offshore servers tied to a subsidiary in Zurich. Arthur Hart used them to store private research under Samuel's name. Energy patents, experimental fuel cell stuff decades ahead of its time. If Samuel was the real inventor, then Edward's entire empire is stolen property. I felt dizzy. Can you prove it? Ava nodded. Maybe. But I'll need access to the mainframe inside Hart Energy. It's locked behind multi-level encryption. If we pull those files, the truth will come out. The truth. The word felt heavier, now sharper. I leaned forward. Then we do it. Ava smiled faintly. You really are Arthur's granddaughter. We worked late into the night, her laptop glowing between us. She connected to remote databases, tracing hidden accounts, encrypted messages, digital fingerprints that pointed to one name again and again, Edward Hart. Every secret, every stolen patent, every dollar siphoned from the foundation Samuel and Arthur built. By midnight, Ava leaned back, rubbing her eyes. I've got something, she said. Audio logs from a month before Arthur's death. She hit play. My grandfather's voice filled the space, steady but strained. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Edward knows. He's already moved funds offshore. The trust will protect her. My granddaughter must find it. She's the only one who can bring this family back to honor. A chill crawled up my spine. I looked at Ava. Can you copy everything? She nodded. Already did. I'll send it to 3 separate cloud vaults, just in case. When I stepped outside, the wind off the river was cold and sharp. I looked back at the cafe lights, at the laptop glowing through the window. The truth was no longer hidden. It was alive and burning. As I walked to my car, a thought echoed in my mind, clear and steady. They thought they'd buried the past, but they forgot roots grow in the dark. The next morning, the city shimmered under the kind of heat that makes everything feel heavier. I hadn't gone home. Ava had let me crash on her couch after we finished backing up the files. Neither of us really slept. She worked through the night scanning the data she'd pulled from Hart Energy's system, muttering about firewalls and IP traces. Around 5, she leaned back, rubbing her eyes. They're already trying to wipe the servers, she said. If I hadn't mirrored the drive in time, all of this would have been gone. I sat at her kitchen table, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee in front of me. Then we move before they can, she nodded. We've got proof, financial records, research notes, patent drafts, all under Samuel Hart's name, your father's name. But it's not enough to expose them. We need the official confirmation from the bank in Zurich. That's where Edward moved the offshore trust. I exhaled slowly. Then I guess I'm going to Switzerland. Ava gave a dry laugh. You think he's just going to let you waltz in there and demand his secrets? Edward's already covering his tracks. Then I'll uncover them faster. By noon, she had arranged a secure connection with a contact at the Swiss Federal Bank, a man named Victor Weiss, someone she'd helped once during a corporate leak years ago. He owes me, she said simply. He'll meet you, but not in his office. He's being watched. When she handed me the burner phone and a printed itinerary, I felt a strange mix of fear and clarity. My entire life had been about following orders. For the first time, I was giving them to myself. Before I left, I called Ryan. He didn't answer. I tried again, left a voicemail. I'm leaving town. I found proof Dad stole everything from Samuel. If you still have any decency left, stay out of his way. My flight left that evening. I traveled under my mother's maiden name, Grace, just in case Edward had people tracking me. As the plane lifted off, the city lights spread beneath me like molten glass. Somewhere below, Edward was tightening his grip, and I was already flying beyond it. Zurich was colder than I expected. Clean, efficient, and too quiet for someone running from ghosts. I met Victor the next day in a small cafe by the lake where the air smelled faintly of espresso and rain. He was tall in his 50s with a nervous habit of checking the door every few minutes. Miss Hart, sorry, Miss Grace, he corrected himself. I've reviewed the documents your friends sent. You're right. The offshore accounts exist. They were created 30 years ago under Samuel Hart's name, then transferred into Edward's control after Samuel's death. I leaned forward, transferred how he hesitated. Forgery, but a sophisticated one. Original signatures, old company seals. It would have taken inside help. My throat tightened. You can prove it, he nodded. Yes, but I'll need to make it official. That means drawing attention, and Edward will notice. Let him, I said quietly. He's already noticed me. He slid a flash drive across the table. This contains copies of the transaction logs and Samuel's last correspondence with Arthur. There's also something else, a sealed file labeled Custodial Transfer Minor Beneficiary. Minor beneficiary, I repeated. Yes, he said. It references a trust fund created for a child after Samuel's death. The name on the record was redacted by court order, but the initials remain LGH. I swallowed hard. Me? Victor nodded slowly. Your grandfather must have set it up for you. But someone, likely Edward, buried it under false adoption paperwork. If you can prove those records were forged, the entire Hart Empire reverts to you as Samuel's heir. The world tilted for a moment. My father's fortune, my family's legacy. Everything I'd been denied. Then Victor's expression changed. He was looking past me toward the street outside. We may have company, he murmured. Through the window, I saw a black sedan parked across the street. Two men in suits sat inside, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses. How did they? They have connections everywhere, he said. You need to leave, now. He stood abruptly, pressing the flash drive into my hand. Keep this safe. I'll send the authentication documents through Ava once they're ready. Don't contact me directly. I slipped out the back door of the cafe, my heart hammering. Rain had started again, slicking the cobblestones as I ducked through side streets. The sedan turned the corner behind me. I broke into a run, cutting through a narrow alley toward the river. My breath came in sharp bursts, echoing off the stone walls. Behind me, footsteps quickened. Then I heard a voice, sharp and familiar. Lena, I turned, startled, and saw Ryan sprinting toward me. He was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. Get in the car, he shouted, pointing to a gray rental idling nearby. For a split second, I froze. I didn't know if I could trust him. But the men from the sedan were closing in fast. I chose the lesser danger and ran for the car. We peeled away from the curb just as the sedan turned the corner. Rain streaked the windshield, thunder rolling in the distance. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded. I followed you, he said, gripping the wheel. Dad sent people after you. They're not here to talk. You mean to kill me? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We drove for nearly an hour, winding through narrow mountain roads until the city disappeared behind us. When Ryan finally pulled over near a lakeside lookout, my nerves were frayed raw. "Start talking," I said. He shut off the engine, staring out at the dark water. "Dad's unraveling. The board's pressuring him, and now that Collins is gone, he's paranoid. He thinks you're working with investors to take the company." "I'm not after his company," I said. "I'm after the truth." He looked at me, his voice low. "Truth won't bring anyone back. Maybe not. But it can stop him." Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the steering wheel. "Do you think exposing him will fix any of this? If the media gets this story, it'll destroy the Hart name completely." "Good," I said coldly. "It deserves to be destroyed." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the windshield. Then Ryan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive. "You're not the only one who found something," he said. "Dad kept backup communications with the board in a private email server. I copied them." I stared. "Why would you do that?" "Because I was tired of watching him lie. He killed everything good in this family." We sat there in silence, two children of the same legacy, both carrying the wreckage of our fathers. Finally, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Victor's flash drive. "Then let's finish what they started." That night, we hid in a cheap motel outside Zurich. Ava called through a secure line, her voice crackling through static. "You have the documents?" "Got them," I said. "And more." "Good," she replied. "Because Edward just called a press conference. He's painting you as a thief, says you hacked company data and blackmailed him." I laughed bitterly. "Of course he is." "Lena, listen," she said urgently. "He's not just spinning the story. He's moving assets out of the country. If we don't act fast, he'll vanish with everything. I won't let him." As the call ended, Ryan looked at me. "What now? We go home," I said. "If he wants a public fight, he'll get one." He nodded slowly. "You sure you're ready for that?" I looked out the window at the storm over the lake, lightning illuminating the waves. "I've been ready since the day they made me scrub their floors." We flew back the next morning, both of us running on coffee and nerves. When the plane touched down in Florida, the air was thick and heavy again, but this time it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like the calm before the explosion. As we drove past the Hart mansion on the way into the city, I glanced at the tall iron gates gleaming under the sunrise. "Do you ever think about burning it down?" I asked. Ryan's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. "Every day." I smiled faintly. "Good, then we're finally on the same side." In the distance downtown, Jacksonville rose like a glass fortress, the empire Edward built on lies. By the time we reached Ava's apartment, the sky was blazing orange, and the first headlines were already spreading online. Hart Energy CEO denies fraud allegations, blames estranged daughter for corporate theft. Ryan turned off the car, his jaw set. "He's coming for you, Lena." I stepped out, clutching the flash drive. "Then let him. I'm done running." And as I walked toward the building, thunder cracked overhead again, sharp and final, like the sound of the first domino falling. The storm hit the same hour the headlines did. By the time I reached Ava's apartment, thunder was rolling over the city like a warning. She was pacing the living room, phone pressed to her ear, laptop glowing with open tabs of financial feeds and legal documents. "He's pulling funds through shell accounts," she said as soon as she saw me. 3 subsidiaries are already shutting down. Edward's burning the money trail before federal investigators can catch it. Ryan followed me and drenched from the rain. "We have the proof," he said. "Can't we just take it to the authorities?" Ava shook her head. "Without official authentication from Zurich, it's circumstantial. He'll spin it as a family feud. We need the narrative and the evidence. Then we make one," I said, taking a deep breath. "A story the public can't ignore." She raised an eyebrow. Meaning I said, "We expose him the same way he exposed me." By evening, every major news outlet had picked up Edward's press conference. He stood on a podium outside Hart Energy headquarters, flanked by attorneys and PR advisors feigning heartbreak. My wife and I took in a child who had nowhere to go, he said to the camera's voice quivering perfectly. And now she's repaying our kindness with betrayal. She stole proprietary data, she's extorting our company. It's devastating. Margaret dabbed at her eyes beside him. Ryan slammed his fist on Ava's counter. Unbelievable. He's using the same speech patterns he used at my college graduation. I stared at the screen. He's not talking to the media. He's talking to investors. Exactly, Ava said. If he controls the narrative, he controls the stock. You need to counter publicly and fast. My pulse raced. How? By telling your version first. You've got Collins's letter, Victor's files, the audio of Arthur admitting Edward forged the patents. I hesitated. If I go public, they'll come after me harder. Ava's tone softened. They already are. Ryan turned to me. She's right. He's trying to bury you. It's time to make him dig his own grave instead. I looked down at the flash drive in my hand, the one with my father's name on it. Samuel Hart. The truth was finally in my possession, and for once I wasn't afraid of it. We set up a live stream from Ava's apartment. Her friend from a local tech blog agreed to host it on a neutral platform. Ava positioned the camera, adjusted the lighting, and handed me a microphone. Speak like you're talking to one person, she said, not the whole world. When the feed went live, my throat tightened. Thousands of people joined in seconds, the same strangers who'd read headlines calling me a thief. I took a deep breath and began. My name is Lena Grace Hart, I said. You've heard my family's version of this story. Now you'll hear mine. I told them everything from being taken into the Hart household as a child to the years of servitude disguised as gratitude. I described the funeral, the letter Arthur left me, and the discovery of the private trust files. Then I played the recordings. Arthur's voice admitting Edward's fraud, the proof of offshore accounts, the evidence Victor had risked his job to collect. For a few moments, the screen was silent. Then the comment section exploded. Messages poured in. I believe you. Expose him. She sounds just like her grandfather. Ryan watched the numbers climb, his eyes wide. It's going viral. Ava leaned closer to her laptop, but he's not going down quietly. She switched to a live feed of Hart Energy's headquarters. Edward was already on camera again, jaw-tight fury bleeding through his mask of control. Those recordings are fabrications, he barked. She's being manipulated by outside parties to destabilize my company. This is defamation. I could almost see the panic in his eyes. For the first time, Edward Hart was cornered. The live stream ended after an hour. Ava slumped back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. You just detonated a corporate bomb. Ryan stared at his phone. And Dad's already calling me. Don't answer, I said. He did anyway. What do you want? His voice was sharp, colder than I'd ever heard. Edward's voice came through the speaker, low and dangerous. You both just signed your death warrants. Ryan froze. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Edward said. You think you can humiliate me. You have no idea what I'm capable of. The line went dead. Ava looked at me. We should leave town. No, I said. If we run, we prove him right. Lena, I'm not hiding anymore. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Rain beat against the glass like fists. I stood by the window, staring down at the street. A black SUV had parked across from the building. The same one I'd seen before. Its engine idled quietly, headlights off. Ryan moved beside me. We need to move. Now, give me 5 minutes, I said. I need to get the backups. I went to Ava's office, grabbed the hard drives from the desk, and stuffed them into my bag. When I came back, the lights flickered. Power's cutting out, Ava said. They're probably trying to kill the feed. A loud bang echoed from below. Ryan cursed. They're here. Ava pulled out a small handgun from her drawer. I've got this. My pulse spiked. Ava, you don't. She cut me off. They're not coming up here without a fight. We moved toward the stairwell. Another crash below. The smell of smoke drifted through the vents. Ryan led the way down the back exit, motioning for silence. Outside, the alley glistened with puddles. Sirens wailed in the distance. We reached the car just as the fire alarm started blaring. Ava tossed me the keys. Drive. I slid into the driver's seat, heart hammering. Ryan jumped in beside me, Ava in the back. We sped through the rain-soaked streets, tires screeching on the slick pavement. Where to? Ryan shouted. Downtown, I said. To the press. If Edward wants a war, we'll give him one in broad daylight. By the time we reached the Jacksonville Journal's office, dawn was breaking. The sky was the color of bruised silver. Ava burst through the lobby doors, waving a flash drive. We have the story, she told the stunned receptionist. You'll want to hear it before your competitors do. Within an hour, reporters crowded the small conference room. Cameras, recorders, notebooks, it felt surreal. I stood at the center, drenched and trembling, holding the physical copies of Arthur's documents. This is the truth, I said. Arthur Hart founded this company with my father, Samuel. Edward Hart forged documents, stole patents, and built an empire on fraud. These are the files proving it. A journalist raised his hand. Are you aware that Edward Hart has filed for an injunction against you? I said. But you can't silence proof. Before I could say more, a voice called out from the hallway. Miss Hart. It was Agent Whitman from the FBI. He flashed his badge, rain dripping from his coat. We've been investigating Hart Energy for months. Your evidence just confirmed everything we needed. A hush fell over the room. We're issuing an arrest warrant for Edward Hart effective immediately, Whitman said. But we'll need your official statement. I nodded, tears of relief stinging my eyes. Ryan exhaled shakily, leaning against the wall. It's over. But it wasn't, not yet. Whitman's phone buzzed. He frowned, stepping away to answer. After a moment, his face darkened. There's been an explosion, he said quietly. Hart Energy headquarters. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! Whitman looked at me. Emergency services are already on the scene. We think Edward's trying to destroy whatever's left. I sank into a chair, heart pounding. The image of Arthur's company, the empire he'd built, the symbol of everything I'd lost, flashed through my mind. He won't stop, I whispered. Not until everything burns. Ryan put a hand on my shoulder. Then maybe that's what it takes to rebuild. Outside, sirens wailed louder. The city was waking up to chaos. And somewhere in the smoke rising from the skyline, Edward Hart was still fighting to keep his lies alive. I stood staring out the window as dawn cut through the clouds, and said softly, Then we end it today. The morning after the explosion, Jacksonville was covered in smoke. Sirens echoed through the city like an unending pulse. The skyline looked fractured, gray columns rising, where Hart Energy's headquarters had stood, blackened glass, littering the streets like fallen stars. I stood behind the police barricade, wind whipping my hair across my face. Reporters were already swarming the area, microphones thrust toward anyone who might talk. Agent Whitman's voice cut through the chaos. Get her out of here, he told an officer. Now. But I didn't move. I couldn't. That building was the heart of everything, of Arthur's empire, of Edward's lies, of my stolen childhood. Seeing it burn felt like watching my own history collapse into ash. Ryan appeared beside me, his face pale, jaw tight. He did it, he said. He destroyed everything. Not everything, I whispered. We still have the backups. He looked at me like he wanted to believe that was enough, but his eyes told me he didn't. Whitman approached us, pulling off his gloves. The fire was set intentionally. We found accelerants in multiple floors. Whoever did this knew exactly where to strike. Edward, I said. He's covering his tracks. Whitman hesitated. That's our assumption. But we haven't found his body. The words froze in my chest. What do you mean you haven't found it? The blast was powerful. He could have been inside, or he could have slipped out before it happened. We won't know until we finish searching. Ryan swore under his breath. If he's alive, he'll come for her again. I turned toward him. Then let him. Later that day, the FBI took my official statement. I sat in a sterile conference room, hands trembling, answering questions about everything: Collins, Victor, Ava, the files, the will. By the time they let me go, the sun had already disappeared behind the smoke. Ava was waiting outside with coffee. She handed it to me, her fingers still shaking. They're saying the explosion took out the entire data center. Years of records gone, but the cloud backups are safe. We're offshore, she said. Multiple servers. Even Edward couldn't scrub them all. I took a long sip, the bitter taste grounding me. Then we release it. Everything. Financials, forged patents, every damn secret. Ryan stared at me. You'll go to war with him. I already am. That night, the city turned against him. Our files went live at midnight, posted anonymously across every major news outlet. Hart Energy fraud exposed. Billion-dollar empire built on stolen invention. CEO under investigation for arson and murder. By sunrise, Hart Energy scandal was trending worldwide. Investors fled. The board announced an emergency suspension of operations. For the first time, Edward's empire was bleeding in public. I watched the coverage from Ava's apartment, curled on the couch with my laptop. The anchors spoke my name like it was a headline. The former housemaid who brought down a corporate dynasty. I should have felt triumphant, but I didn't. Instead, I felt hollow. All my life I'd dreamed of being seen. Now the whole world saw me, and it didn't feel like victory, it felt like exposure. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered, expecting a journalist. But the voice on the other end made my blood run cold. Congratulations, Lena, Edward said. His tone was calm, measured, as if he were calling from a business meeting instead of the ruins of his empire. You finally got your revenge. My throat tightened. Where are you? You really think I'd tell you that? He laughed quietly. I've survived worse than fire. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've done. His voice darkened. You didn't save the family name. You killed it. You killed it yourself, I snapped. All I did was show the world who you really are. You think truth matters? He asked softly. Truth doesn't build empires. Power does. And you just gave yours away to strangers. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Ryan was watching me. That was him, wasn't it? I nodded. He's losing everything, Ryan said. He's desperate. That makes him dangerous. He's always been dangerous, I said. But now he's cornered. That night we stayed awake listening to the news cycle, repeat his downfall on endless loop. Anonymous sources leaked board memos, former employees coming forward. The world was eating Edward Hart alive. Still, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I stood by the window looking out over the river. Jacksonville glowed under scattered lights, the reflection trembling in the dark water. Ava joined me quietly. You did it, she said. He's finished. I didn't turn around. Then why doesn't it feel like it? Because revenge isn't the same as peace. I swallowed hard. Maybe I don't deserve peace. Everyone does, she said. Even you. The next morning, a knock on the door jolted us both. I looked through the peephole. 2 FBI agents stood in the hallway. Miss Hart, the taller one said when I opened the door. We need you to come with us. Ryan stepped forward. What's this about? The agent glanced at him. We've located a suspect believed to be Edward Hart. We'll need Miss Hart to confirm the identification. The drive took us across town through back streets I barely recognized. The agents led us to a small marina where crime scene tape fluttered in the wind. A black SUV was half submerged at the edge of the dock. I felt my chest tighten. Whitman approached. We found this vehicle about an hour ago, registered to Edward Hart. One body inside burned beyond recognition. We'll need DNA to confirm. Ryan's voice broke. You think it's him? Whitman nodded grimly, judging by the personal effects. Yes. I stared at the charred vehicle, the smell of gasoline and salt water filling my lungs. He always said he'd die before letting anyone else control his empire. Ryan put a hand on my shoulder. Maybe that's exactly what he did. Whitman's radio crackled, drawing him away. I stood there staring at the water rippling around the twisted metal. I thought I'd feel closure, but all I felt was exhaustion. When we got back to Ava's apartment, she was glued to her computer. "The media already knows," she said softly. "They're calling it suicide." I sank onto the couch. Good. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed it. 2 days later, the investigation confirmed the remains were indeed Edward's. The autopsy matched his dental records. The board released a statement expressing deep sorrow. Margaret vanished from public view. The Hart name was officially dead. Reporters begged for interviews. Investors called with offers to buy the remaining shares. I ignored them all. That night, I opened my grandfather's letter one last time. Don't let them bury the truth with me. His handwriting was faint, now smudged by time and my tears. "I didn't," I whispered. "But I buried something else instead." Ryan found me on the balcony, the city stretching out behind us. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" He hesitated. "For him, yes. For us, maybe not." I looked at him. "What will you do now?" He smiled sadly. "I don't know. Maybe start over. You should too." I nodded, but something inside me still ached. The truth was out, the lies exposed, but revenge didn't feel like redemption. It felt like a wound that refused to close. Later, as dawn broke over the river, I whispered to myself, "They tried to break me by making me invisible, but now everyone knows my name." The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of smoke from the ruins across town. For the first time, I realized it wasn't the smell of destruction, it was the smell of cleansing. Edward was gone. The empire was ash. And I was still standing. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the quiet before something new began. The night of the fire returned in flashes like broken glass catching light. I didn't remember driving to the mansion. I just knew I had to see it one last time to face what was left of the house that built and buried me. The gates were open, the security lights dead. The old Hart estate loomed in the distance, its windows glowing faintly through the fog. I parked halfway up the drive, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and whiskey. The portraits that once lined the walls were gone, leaving pale rectangles on the wallpaper. Somewhere deeper in the house, a record player crackled, faintly stuck on a loop of static. Edward sat in the library, exactly where I knew he would be. The flames in the fireplace painted his face in shades of orange and shadow. His white shirt was half unbuttoned, and there was a gun resting on the table beside him. He looked up when I entered, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, weary and venomous. "You always did love a dramatic entrance. I learned from the best," I said quietly. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down. Let's talk like family." I didn't move. "You stopped being family the moment you made me a servant in my own home." He chuckled, low and bitter. "You think I enjoyed raising another man's child? You were a reminder every single day of everything I'd lost. Then why take me?" He leaned back, eyes glinting. "Because Arthur demanded it. He said you were Samuel's daughter, that the company belonged to you." But he was